Welcome to our little presentation about LOLI and how LOLI can aid REACH compliance. Today's presenters are Bridget Bartko, my colleague. She is a team member with our REACH Services Department and also a regulatory compliance specialist working with our LOLI team here at ChemAdvisor in Pittsburgh. And let me introduce myself. My name is Wolfgang Urhan and I'm the team leader of our REACH Services. And I'm also a member of the LOLI team in Pittsburgh at ChemAdvisor. The REACH regulation 1907-2006 came in force in June 2007 and is the main regulation in the EU taking care of registration, evaluation, authorization and restriction of chemicals in the EU. There are four main pieces to that new regulation. The first part is registration, the second part is evaluation, the third part is authorization, and then we do have restriction. Everything that's imported into the EU in amounts above 1 ton in terms of substances requires a registration. After submitting the registration, ECHA and the EU Commission evaluates your dossier, but there might be also some substances which are already on the Annex 14 which are subject to authorization. Means you have to apply if you plan to place such a substance on the EU market to apply officially for an authorization and an authorization number. Several substances are prohibited or restricted in the EU. So you have to look closer at the Annex 17 of the REACH regulation, the former Marketing and Use Restriction Directive, which is now implemented in Annex 17. So this is basically a rough overview of the REACH regulation. And now I would like to ask Bridget to show us where can we actually find the REACH information in LOLI.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Okay, so everybody has access to LOLI Desktop Administrator, and if you go into the search at the top of your screen, which would be located right here, you can search LOLI lists. Right now, we're looking at the entire list view of what you would see when you open that tab. And over here on the right, if you click on European Union legislation, and then also down here under REACH, you get an overview of all of the REACH lists that we currently have in LOLI. Let's say you want to find which part of the REACH regulation applies to your substance. We would search and do a query. So you press on the search tab at the top of the menu, and it would bring up the query tab. You put in your CAS number. For this example, we're going to use formaldehyde. And every time we recommend that you click Show Links. After you enter in the CAS, you want to come down to the search filter and make sure you put in LOLI list category European Union legislation. If you remember on the previous slide, we showed you where the REACH lists are located in LOLI. They're under European Union legislation. And after you click on Show Links, this is the view you see. So now we're going to hit Search. This is an example of the query result for formaldehyde. We can now see that under the European Union legislation, under the REACH lists, there are several lists that apply. And I'm going to hand it off now to Wolfgang to talk a little bit about registration.
Thank you, Bridget. Now, after we know how to do our first steps in our LOLI database, I would like to explain a little bit more in detail what registration actually means under REACH. As I mentioned at the very beginning, for any substance that you either manufacture or import into the EU, and if the amount placed on the EU market reaches or exceeds 1 metric ton per year per either importer or manufacturer, you are then obliged to prepare a registration dossier, and that of course depends on the tonnage band. means how much you place on the EU market. So you either have to register or had to register in 2010, or you have to register in 2013, and maybe you have obligations to register in 2018. And to catch all this information regarding when will a substance be registered, was a substance actually pre-registered, or is a substance already registered with ECHA, we have also some lists in LOLI which show you exactly what's going on regarding a certain CAS number. And please, Bridget, show us now where and how we can find that information. Thank you.
So using the query that we had done before in formaldehyde, we see that formaldehyde is included on the list of pre-registered substances with the envisaged registration deadline of November 30th, 2010. And then below, we also see it's on the list of registered substances. So in fact, somebody has registered it as of November 2010. Say we know which list we want to search through. We can go to the search feature at the top of the LOLI Desktop Administrator, and we can click Search LOLI Lists. You go to the Search tab on this feature, and we can go down here. Put in your CAS number. We're going to use formaldehyde again as an example, and we search our active list. We only want to search for the list of registered substances, and we want to be searching in the CAS field for the specific CAS number. You hit the search button, and this is the result that it shows you the list header and also the entry for formaldehyde. Also in LOLI Desktop, we have the list of pre-registered substances. Before, when we were doing our query, we had done the query on the list of registered substances, but also in LOLI, we have the list of pre-registered substances as well.
Thank you, Bridget. There's also some good news regarding the REACH regulation because certain substances are actually exempted from the REACH regulation. So we have four main categories of substances. First of all kind of substances which are used in plant health products like pesticides are regarded as being registered as long as they are used for that specific purpose. The same applies also for biocides. So any substance that is used to manufacture a biocidal product, those substances are exempted from REACH as well because they are covered by the Biocides Directive. Then substances which were notified to the ELINGS inventory are exempted from REACH registration as well, but those notifications only apply to the actual owner of the notification. Then we have two annexes to the REACH regulation. One is the Annex 4, which contains, for example, minerals, water, the noble gases, vitamins, and so on. And then we have Annex 5, which consists of certain groups of substances like ores, non-reactive substances, naturally occurring and non-reactive substances. And then we have substances which are considered radioactive substances, food and feed additives, medicines for veterinary or human use. All those substances are covered by their own regulations or directives. But regarding the plant health products and biocides and regarding Annex 4 and 5, we also have some designated information in our LOLI desktop or LOLI database. LOLI Online. Please, Bridget, let us have a closer look at that now.
As Wolfgang had mentioned in the previous slides, there are also other lists that have exemptions listed in them as well. Annex 4 and Annex 5 have exemptions from obligations to register. Let's say we were only interested in the substances on Annex 5. We could go into the LOLI list search feature, pull down the European Union legislation menu, and go into the REACH menu. We are only interested in this list, so we should double click on that list and the list item. It would bring up the whole list, including the header and all the substances on that list.
Thank you, Bridget. Now we know where we can search for specific substances which might be exempted from the REACH regulation. And now we need to look a little bit closer at the authorization requirements. As mentioned at the very beginning, any substance which is subject to authorization will be listed or is already listed in the Annex 14 of the current REACH regulation. And there's another list which gives us a forecast into the future about all those substances which might end up on the Annex 14. This is the so-called candidate list of substances of very high concern subject to authorization. And one of those lists, the first list of SVHC, or the first candidate list, was published in October 2008. And currently the EU Commission and ECHA they are both very busy with reviewing a lot of substances and adding more substances to the candidate list, and also adding those substances maybe later to the Annex 14. And all these substances will become or are already subject to authorization. Means you have to formally apply for permission from ECHA and the EU Commission to place such substances on the EU market. Also, member state competent authorities or anybody who is interested in a substance of very high concern can submit a proposal or a registry of intention to ECHA, and those proposals and intentions will be also published on the ECHA website. So we catch all that information in several LOLI lists, and Bridget will show us a little bit more information about those LOLI lists now.
This screenshot shows us how many lists we have in LOLI that correspond to authorization under REACH. As you can see, we have 5 different lists. You can check the substances subject to authorization, the candidate list of substances subject to authorization, submitted Annex 15 dossiers for SVHCs, potential SVHCs, and current intentions for proposals for SVHCs. You have to make sure that you check all of these lists, because once a substance makes its way to one of these lists, it's probably going to make its way to Annex 14. So you have to be checking all of these lists all of the time. Let's do a query on dibutyl phthalate to see which SVHC list it is located on in LOLI. So we would go into the search feature at the top of the screen and go into the LOLI query. Enter in the CAS number, which is 84742. Make sure we show links, and we also want to make sure we change the search filter from all lists to the specific list category of European Union legislation. Looking at this, currently I don't think that we need any additional links checked. So right now we're just going to check 84742. Hit the search button. Now we can see all of the European Union legislation lists that apply to this CAS. We're only interested in REACH, so we click on the REACH tab. And we can see that quite a few lists apply. However, the most important one is Annex 14, Substances Subject to Authorization. And you can see I have it here called out. And right here down below is an actual larger screenshot to show you what the actual data on the list looks like. Article manufacturers and importers that import into the EU may have notification requirements if their article contains substances or a substance that is an SVHC. For an example, let's act like we are an article manufacturer and we know that we have a pigment in our article. For example, a pen. So we would enter in the CAS to the LOLI query. We would make sure to click Show Links. I don't see any links that would correspond to our substance, so I'm not going to click any of the links. Make sure our search filter is the European Union legislation and hit search. And we see right here that this specific CAS for lead chromate molybdenate sulfate red, which is a pigment that may be used in inks, is on the candidate list subject to authorization. So, if you're an article manufacturer with this substance in your article, you may have notification requirements under REACH.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. And for all those of you that manufacture or import substances into the EU, there is another annex of the REACH regulation which might be of importance. And that annex is the Annex 17. Annex 17 actually replaced the former Directive on Restrictions for Marketing and Use in the EU and came in force on June 1st, 2009. So if you intend to place products or pure substances on the EU market which are intended for selling them to end users, means consumers, then you have to look very closely at Annex 17 because several hundred substances are restricted for the use by consumers. This is very important. You have to, first of all, include that information in your safety data sheet in, in the section 15. And you have to make sure that products that contain such substances do not end up in the supply chain for the end user. And we will have now a closer look at the content of the Annex 17 LOLI list, and Bridget will show us now an example. Thank you.
As an example, we're now going to do a LOLI query on cadmium. We're going to see which restrictions under REACH apply. So right now we're going to start the query off by entering in the CAS number for just cadmium. It's 7440439. However, when we hit show links, we can also see that cadmium compounds and cadmium inorganic compounds also might be of interest to us. So we check those specific link boxes. And again, we're searching under European Union legislation, and we hit the search button. Under the REACH lists, we see that restrictions, that this CAS is on the list of restrictions on certain dangerous substances on Annex 17. But we also see another thing. So first we see the CAS for 7440439, and we also see an RR number. This corresponds to cadmium compounds. This is also on the Annex 17 restrictions list. Also in LOLI, we have non-governmental organization lists. However, if you were looking at the queries we were doing before, you would not find these lists. They're listed under a different part of the LOLI categories. They're listed under advisory agencies. There are two specific non-governmental organizations that apply to REACH, and they're the ETUC and the ChemSec lists. This search shows you how you would go about finding them. We would go to the search feature at the top of the screen, hit search LOLI lists, and click on the advisory agencies tab. And at the beginning, we see the European Trade Union Confederation. This is where the ETUC list would be at. We also have the International Chemical Secretariat, and that's where the SIN list is. So let's say we want to search an NGO list, and we want to see if a specific CAS is on it. Let's search for asbestos crocodilite. First, we search for the CAS, and we want to enter the specific links that go along with it. We're changing our search filter from European Union legislation to advisory agencies, and then we hit search. And we can see that the first CAS, the 12001-284 for asbestos crocodilite, popped up on the International Chemical Secretariat, or the SIN list. And why? It's classified as a CMR.
Thank you, Bridget, for showing us the lists regarding the restrictions. Now, of course, REACH also has a huge impact on the product label because, as explained earlier, if one or more than one of your substances is or will become subject to authorization, and once an authorization number is granted, you have to include that authorization number on your product or substance label. Then there are very drastic changes to your product or substance label, which are related to the new EU GHS system. The EU implemented and set in force the new CLP regulation in December 2008. And that means that you, as a manufacturer or importer, have to change your labels for your pure substances. That is already in force since December 1st, 2010. And then for your mixtures, a little bit later, and the deadline here is June 2015. So there are a lot of changes now on the way, and I would like to introduce you now to the new CNL requirements under REACH and CLP. First of all, the EU Commission and ECHA is planning to publish a new classification and labeling inventory. Their goal is to have just one harmonized classification and labeling for each substance in the EU. And this is required according to the CLP regulation. It is also required to report your substances to the new inventory at ECHA as soon as your substance is subject to REACH registration, or in case your substance is considered hazardous or dangerous according to the new CLP regulation. And the second bullet point here, according to the CLP, means, of course, regardless of the tonnage, while subject to REACH registration, of course, is directly linked to the threshold limit of 1 metric ton per year. We have several lists in LOLI. First of all, the CLP, CLP regulation, has one annex, one specific annex, the Annex 6. And Annex 6 consists of a Table 3.1 and a Table 3.2. Table 3.2 consists of all the information that came from the old Annex 1 of the DSD. And Table 3.1 consists of all the new CNL information based on the CLP classification requirements. And you can see here under European Union legislation, we have included in LOLI those two tables under section classification and labeling. Now again, as Bridget showed us earlier, you can do, of course, a search by entering the particular CAS number. Here we used again the example formaldehyde, and then you click on search filter and choose then again list category 1 European Union legislation, and then hit the search button. And you can see here we highlighted those results. You see here table 3.1, which is related, of course, to Annex 6 of the CLP regulation, and there you can see actually what the current classification labeling for formaldehyde in the EU is. By doing a right click on a query result and sending a list to LOLI list view, you can then actually view the entire content of that particular list, again including the list header of that LOLI list. But there are not only the official CNLs according to table 3.1 and table 3.2. Currently, member state competent authorities or industry are very busy with submitting harmonized CNL proposals to the European Chemicals Agency, ECHA, in Helsinki. And we catch all that information in another LOLI list, which is called Harmonized Classification and Labeling Current Consultations. So once that information is placed on the ECHA website, industry and manufacturers, importers, member state competent authorities have the option to comment that. There is a 30 days consultation period, and we actually catch here that information. So if you are working with one of those substances which are already or is already on that list, you have to be very cautious because there might be a change coming up regarding the classification labeling for one of those substances. Also, authorities EU-wide submit now their intentions to the harmonized CNL inventory. For example, you can see here that Italy, the United Kingdom, France, Ireland, Germany were already very busy with submitting their intentions to change or to propose a change for a certain substance regarding the classification and labeling. And we catch that information always in LOLI as well, and it's always up to date. So whenever a change occurs on the ECHA website, this information goes immediately into our LOLI list. Once an intention was registered or submitted to ECHA, then the member state competent authority have a certain deadline to submit a dossier. They have to prepare then an Annex 15 dossier that includes tox, ecotox data, justification why they actually propose this particular CNL. And that information is also included in one of our LOLI lists. You can see actually here the chemical substance name, who submitted the dossier to ECHA, and why they think and what the actual or new classification labeling shall be in the future. Now, this is the overview of all our REACH-related LOLI lists we currently have in our system. There are several more lists. We could not cover all the lists here. We just showed you some important examples, but this is the complete overview of the REACH-related content in our LOLI database. So if you are a manufacturer or importer and you do business in the EU with chemical substances, the REACH regulation, of course, has a huge impact on your supply chain. You have maybe obligations to communicate certain substances, certain CNL information. So you need to classify, of course, your substances and label your products or substances properly. You might be thinking about developing new substances or products. So there is a lot of information out there regarding REACH, and these REACH lists will help you to communicate properly in your supply chain to make sure that your substances or mixtures are classified and labeled properly according to existing EU legislation. And it also will help you to choose the right substances and to avoid wasting money and time doing research and development on substances which might become subject to authorization in the near future or which will have restrictions. So you can search our LOLI list and make sure that you don't waste your money and time when you develop new products or substances. Okay, if you need more help, of course, we have some information on our website regarding ChemAdvisor Online or with LOLI Desktop or LOLI Database products. And if you would like to have more information, you can either contact us under info@chemadvisor.com, or you can also contact our REACH team at reach@chemadvisor.com. And this closes now our little introductory session today. We would like you to thank you for your attention, and also thank you to Bridget to show us some of the important lists under REACH. Thank you very much, and hope we will hear from you soon.